Coming to you live from Edelman, Malaysia's office, a very good morning and welcome to the Malaysia launch of the 21st Annual Edelman Trust Barometer. My name is Sophia and I will be your MC for today. 2020 was a challenging year for all. From the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic downturn and the urgent need to address systemic issues are combining to topple people's fundamental values and priorities. This year, the Edelman 2021 Trust Barometer will examine the fundamental rebalancing of power. Has the government lived up to the heightened trust placed in its leadership at a time of pandemic? How well are businesses delivering on its multi-stakeholder promise? And most importantly, how is society responding to not only the pandemic, but also the infodemic for the ongoing battle of truth? We have an insightful session ahead of us, so we do hope that you will stay with us till the end. If you have any questions, do drop them in the chat box and we'll address them during the Q&A session. And the hashtag for today's event is #MYTrustBarometer. Before we reveal the findings, we'd like to present a keynote address by Yang Bahagia Datuk Sri Mustafa Muhammad from the Prime Minister's Department for Economic Affairs.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for inviting me to the launch of the Malaysian results from the Edelman Trust Barometer 2021. The past year has been one like none other. Our collective economic and social systems have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic more than any other crisis in modern history. Despite the challenging year we have experienced together, it was welcome news to hear from our central bank, Bank Negara, last month that our economy is expected to return to pre-COVID levels in the second half of this year. This positive outlook is a sign that Malaysia's economy is steadily recovering. Although there have been a lot of noises, Malaysians overall have been united in facing this crisis. Our country's trajectory towards economic recovery would not be possible without the creativity and steadfastness of all Malaysians, from the frontliners to the men and women on the street. Every day, we see how the government and the rakyat have been helping vulnerable groups and those adversely impacted by the crisis. We should be proud of this. That said, many of the existential challenges now facing the nation are not new. The pandemic has only accelerated some long-standing and systemic issues, forcing our companies and institutions to rethink the true value of their operations from the perspective of all their stakeholders and not just for their immediate shareholders. Today's gathering, hosted by Edelman, is thus a timely one because there has never been a more crucial time to assess and understand the significance of trust. With the lessons learned during the pandemic, it is time for us to have conversations about how we can collectively enhance trust in Malaysia's institutions going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, trust is the connective fabric that binds together everything that we do, our relationships, our actions, and our expectations of others. We expect our institutions, be it the government, business, media, NGOs, or other organizations, to deliver on their promises while behaving ethically and responsibly. In times of crisis, tapping into the wellspring of trust is paramount to disseminating critical information and maintaining public confidence in our institutions. Distrust, on the other hand, can have a damaging effect. The speed, unpredictability, and magnitude of change due to COVID-19 have greatly impacted us. Fears and worries about jobs, the economy, and the future have all increased, not just locally, but globally as well. As a result, the spread of the coronavirus has been accompanied by a wave of disinformation on social media, which has further amplified distrust. As resilient leaders who seek to shepherd our organizations and stakeholders safely through the COVID-19 crisis, trust has become even more critical than before, as recovery without trust would be built on fragile foundations. Therefore, if the single most important weapon against the COVID-19 pandemic is a vaccine, the second most important will be effective communication. Ladies and gentlemen, the government has identified the digital economy as one of the key growth areas required to build a more resilient economy. Through My Digital, the government aims to empower Malaysians with digital skills, enabling digitally empowered businesses and driving digital investments. We are also cognizant that the accelerated need for digitalization has also created new trust considerations around the safe and ethical use of technology and data. Going forward, cybersecurity will be even more vital. For this reason, My Digital rightfully identifies cybersecurity as a key component of building trust in the digital ecosystem under Trust 6, which is to build a trusted, secure, and ethical digital environment. Ladies and gentlemen, just as digital will be a key dimension for securing trust in the new normal, the social and physical dimensions will continue to be essential parts of the human experience. The return to pre-COVID-19 physical and social interactions will depend on our ability to have confidence that we will be safe from infection in public places. As recovery continues and workers are re-engaged, leaders will need to communicate and reassure the workforce that they are returning to safe environments. Employees who must be physically present at the workplace will need to trust that they can safely do their jobs with minimum risk. With respect to the workforce, concerns about job losses are high, compounded by uncertainty regarding how long the recovery will take. Although initiatives to help employees and workers maintain the financial health for the long term will be essential, will also become important to consider the other side of the coin. Unkept promises can lead to loss of trust. Therefore, communications should be grounded in clear, achievable actions with a focus on maintaining integrity in the face of financial uncertainty. Ladies and gentlemen, many of the lessons learned by necessity during the MCO, such as remote work, virtual collaboration, increased digitalization, greater flexibility in working with partners and stakeholders, may result in permanent changes in the socio-economic and political landscape. These shifts will vary from industry to industry and type of institution, but resilient leaders must be prepared to adapt as needed. Balancing stakeholder trust will be one of the most important elements in an institutional leader's agenda. Leaders should do so with a vision and purpose grounded in trust and deliver it competently, openly, honestly, and with clear intent. Leaders must therefore enhance objectivity and transparency when communicating with various stakeholders. Speed must then be deployed to rebut disinformation and false narratives peddled by irresponsible individuals and organizations. These three factors, objectivity, transparency, and speed, will go a long way in enhancing trust. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this will set the tone for the deliberations and conversations throughout this event. We need innovative ideas on how to incorporate trust into multi-stakeholder initiatives that will enhance public confidence in our societal institutions. With that, I thank you for your kind attention. I wish everyone a great day ahead and a very productive discussion. Thank you.
Without further ado, I'd like to invite Christopher De Cruz, Group Director of Edelman Malaysia, to present the 2021 Trust Barometer Malaysia results. Chris, over to you.
The results for Malaysia are revealing, yet far from shocking. Across the globe, fears for job security and slumping economies dominate the news. Our nation is no different. Malaysia's GDP shrank by 5.6% in 2020, seeing its worst contraction since the 1998 Asian financial crisis. Overall, a key trend that we will see today is that trust in Malaysian institutions has risen but remains shakily built on fragile foundations. This year, we surveyed over 33,000 respondents in 28 countries with around 1,100 respondents per country. You will also see that at times, we segment the data into what we call the informed public and the mass population. The informed public must meet 4 criteria. They must be between the ages of 25 and 64, college educated, in the top quartile income of their country and must report significant consumption of business and public policy news. It represents about 17% of the total study. The other 83% are the mass population sample, which is everyone minus the informed public. The data for this study was collected between mid-October and mid-November of 2020. So we've been studying trust for over 21 years, and the survey has revealed a number of long-term trends. In 2005, we first documented the shift from authorities to peers and the rise of a person like myself as more credible. More recently, we noted a growing inequality of trust, which has only worsened since we first identified it in 2016. In 2018, we looked at the battle for truth, with the data revealing a deep concern about the rise of fake news and misinformation. That trend has only gotten worse since then, culminating in a raging infodemic for our 2021 report. We are now at a point where institutions must declare information bankruptcy and find a way to rebuild from there. But first, let's look at the overall trust landscape. At first glance, the Edelman 2021 Trust Barometer, which ranks countries based on their trust index, which is the average of the trust in the 4 institutions in each country. You will notice that Malaysia sits in the trusted category, dark blue, and up by 6 points. We will speak about where Malaysia and its related trusted institutions sit later on. The countries in light blue being countries within the neutral category, and those in red classified with points below 50 as countries in the distrusted zone. 2 of the big headlines globally are the US and China, the 2 biggest economies in the world. China lost its place at the top of the ranking with a 10-point trust decline, the largest decrease of any country this year, and the biggest trust drop ever recorded in China. Alarmingly, as we talk about the 4 institutions we map, government, business, NGO, and media, business in trust in China has dropped 21 points. There has been a range of elements around that: corporate scandals, the suspension of Ant Group IPO, the antitrust investigations of Alibaba, amongst others. So we have trust reports of each of these countries, and we can share that with you in market analysis, if it would suit your business needs. Trust in the US was relatively stable in terms of changes from 2020 to 2021, but our post-election survey saw a dramatic 5-point decline in trust from November to December, which would place the US near the bottom of the ranking. So compared to countries globally, in Malaysia, we are in a much more promising position, earning a rank among the top 10 countries with the highest trust index. In fact, 6 of the 10 of the top trust earning countries are from Asia, and Malaysia is one of only 3 APEC countries to have an increase in their trust index this year. This year, we also saw the world's most high-profile countries lose trust capital. Companies headquartered in China, the US, the UK, and Germany all saw significant declines in trust. Going into 2021, business is now the most trusted institution, in fact at 61% trust. It is the only institution that is trusted, along with NGOs, with a 2-point increase since last year, increasing its lead over NGOs. Not surprisingly, business is more trusted than government in 18 of the 27 countries we measured. That said, many business industry sectors are under pressure and being tested this year. Year on year, technology, professional services, and fashion all saw 6-point declines. In the long term, the tech sector has lost 9 points of trust since 2012 across the 22 markets that can be tracked over the long term. The Malaysian government has been bold and assertive in their approach to curb the socio-economic impacts of the pandemic on the population, unveiled a slew of economic stimulus packages, including the Prihatin packages, the additional Prihatin package, the Penjana plan, and the Kita Prihatin package, worth nearly 300 billion ringgit in total. Many of these stimulus packages include staggered policies and assistance programs targeted for groups worst hit by the pandemic, including small and medium businesses. The quick and targeted policy actions have helped to improve overall trust levels in the government, and the national government has also been seen as a trusted source of information during the pandemic, with 60% of Malaysians trusting information that came from it. All in all, it is encouraging to see all 4 institutions of a country having increased levels of trust, and as we have done this for 21 21 years, we have seen this point to solid foundations of collaboration between core tenets of a country on the back of adversity such as a pandemic. So, last year, we rolled out these axes, and we have done a lot over the past year to make the results of the survey actionable and measurable. And what we saw clearly over the 21 years of the survey is that there are two key planes in terms of building and managing trust: how competent you are and how ethical you are seen to be as well. So to remain in the trusted level, government must work harder in its undertakings to be seen as both competent and ethical, especially when it comes to doing the right thing for Malaysians. We may attribute the slightly lower score to the instability and inconsistency of the ever-evolving makeup of the Malaysian cabinet, affecting the long-term efficacy of policies put in place, thus potentially eroding their competency and ethical scores. Businesses and NGOs are the only institutions seen as both competent and ethical, moving up from last year, where it was seen as competent but not ethical. What's important to note here is that while global results have pointed to an infodemic of information bankruptcy, results in Asia Pacific and Malaysia note that we are currently on encouraging foundations. And importantly, Edelman is helping businesses and industries to be able to benchmark and measure trust within their stakeholder universe, something that our counterparts in Edelman Singapore recently did for the Association of Banks in Singapore around putting in place a trust benchmark for the banking industry as it seeks to improve its trust scores within their stakeholder universe moving forward. So, the year 2020 for Malaysia has been a pivotal lighthouse for many to look forward to, but in reality, the year was far from ideal. So as we look at the data, we also contextualize that by looking at the key stories that shape people's perception in the nation. In just 12 months, a year in review, we've had the Sheraton move in February, which culminated in the forming of a bipartisan government realigning the country's political landscape. Panic buying of groceries began as Malaysia locked down following the second wave of COVID-19. Contact tracing and virus screenings marked the start of the COVID norm in the first 100 days of the Perikatan national government. Marquee festivals, including Hari Raya Puasa, were quietly celebrated in the comfort of our homes. The trial of former PM Najib Razak began. The Sabah state election would see the start of the third wave of COVID-19 in the country. A staggering 355 billion budget was announced for 2021, Malaysia's biggest spending ticket to date, and meant to kickstart the economy post-COVID. Concerted efforts were taken to avoid a recession, with BNM stepping in to announce the first OPR cut by 25 basis points, a level we've not seen since 2011. The movement control orders and its implications on the country's domestic business landscape have been telling. There has been light at the end of the tunnel though, including the government's decision to implement key transport infrastructure projects with a total allocation of almost 15 billion, which bode well for the industry, especially after it lost nearly 19 billion due to the pandemic. The Pfizer vaccine was also approved in December 2020, and Malaysia became the first country in Southeast Asia to announce a deal with the US drug maker after some expressed reservations over the need for ultra cold storage. All in all, speaking of the vaccine, without a doubt, the major story of 2020 has been the COVID-19 pandemic and its associated economic impact. Trust has never been put to the test more than it has this year, and as you'll see, some institutions and some countries have passed the test better than others. This was also a year that continued to see an increase in trust inequality, with a large gap in trust between the more affluent informed public sample versus the mass population that we spoke about earlier. In 2021, we record a 16-point trust gap, as well as a record number of countries with double-digit trust inequality, including Malaysia. A telling example of this would be when the Dow Jones Index hit over 30,000, while unemployment sat at record levels in the US, signaling market resilience, but also a real sign of problems related to inequalities brimming at the surface in the US and across the globe. So while keeping in mind that the survey was done between mid-October to mid-November, closer to home in Malaysia, it turns out that contracting COVID is not the concern Malaysians are most worried about, as an even greater percentage, 89% of Malaysians, are concerned about job loss as the primary effect of the pandemic. Climate change, cybersecurity, and loss of personal freedoms due to mandatory stay-at-home orders were also cited among Malaysians' worries and concerns. The pandemic has continued to add persistent personal and societal fears beyond just health and economic concerns alone. The pandemic is not only a concern in isolation. It has also, next slide please. The pandemic is not only a concern in isolation, it has also worsened the concerns Malaysians already have. More than half have witnessed layoffs or reductions in the workforce of the company they work for, and 56% worry that the pandemic will accelerate job loss due to automation. This is underlined by the fact that Malaysia's unemployment rate rose 4.5% last year, the highest rate recorded since 1993. The number of unemployed individuals in December also rose for the annual comparison, rising 1.6% to 772,900 individuals, or at a rate of 4.8% in December. Again, these are trends that we saw pre-pandemic, but these results show that the events of the recent year has accelerated these fears. However, it has been encouraging to see government and businesses come together to put in place initiatives to help unemployed Malaysians get new jobs and skills. An example would be companies like Tenaga Nasional, MDEC, and Grab coming together with the government as part of the HRDF Penjana initiative in an effort to create as many as 40,000 jobs for Malaysians affected by the pandemic. Globally, the pandemic has also accelerated the concerns about inequality around the world. There is a concern about that the pandemic will deepen inequity around the world as people see the economic and health impacts distributed unequally across society. More than 6 in 10 agree that those with fewer privileges, education, money, and resources are being burdened with more of the suffering and the need to sacrifice due to health and economic impacts of the pandemic. These escalating fears have created a dramatic increase in urgency in finding answers and solutions for critical societal problems. When asked whether certain societal problems have become more or less important since last year, improving our healthcare system has become 73 points more important, along with addressing poverty and improving our education system. From the perspective of Malaysians surveyed, the most foundational building block society are in desperate need of repair. There is a growing examination of conscience amongst all of us as we sit down in our spaces contemplating the future and what we must collectively do, not only these institutions, to fix the foundational societal problems that affect the weakest members of our society and have given rise to inequalities. With all these escalating fears, the message is poignant. We don't know whom to trust, we don't know where to trust, and we don't know whom to believe, and we don't know what to believe. People, including Malaysians, have lost faith in traditional markers of information credibility, and so in a fearful, crisis-ridden world, we are facing not just a COVID pandemic, but we are also facing an infodemic of epidemic proportions. Amidst urgent problems and in a year of crisis, leadership is failing. None of the societal leaders, government officials, CEOs, journalists, or even religious leaders are trusted to do what is right. The people who are trusted, interesting, are those that are more local and familiar, such as people in my local community and my own employer CEO. Scientists are still trusted, although even here there was a significant decrease in trust since last year. A pivot into some of the thoughts on Malaysian media. Nearly 6 in 10 Malaysians surveyed noted that news organizations are actually concerned with supporting an ideology or a political position than they are with informing people about what is actually happening in the world. And this is worrying. And 65% believe that the media is not doing well at being objective and non-partisan. Without trust in societal leaders and traditional news organizations, Malaysians are definitively seeking alternative sources of information. The problem is that the vast majority of people still don't know how to manage their information diet. Against the backdrop of mistrust in traditional media, the 2021 trust data also revealed that only 3 out of 10 Malaysians practice good information hygiene, which is defined by engagement with news, avoiding information echo chambers, verifying information, and not amplifying unvetted information. Of the 65% of respondents that said that they share news items that they find interesting, only 29% practice good information hygiene. Even among the 57% who report that they share or forward news items that they find to be interesting, only 29%, less than 1 in 3, practice good information hygiene, meaning a significant amount of unvetted information is being consumed and disseminated in Malaysia. Next. As a result, in a world where information is shaped by search engine algorithms and social media feeds, people are recognizing that they need to take more personal responsibility for their information diet. There is an increasing sense that personal information and media literacy matters more to me, as well as the importance of being more politically aware. Fortunately, media and information literacy were cited as among the top priorities for this year compared to last year, an increase of plus 58 points, just below prioritizing family and personal needs. This reflects the growing awareness and willingness of the public of increasing their skill set for verifying news and information. Improving Malaysians' media literacy carries high stakes for the country's public health and economy, as poor information hygiene could threaten the pandemic recovery. The Trust data highlights a correlation between information hygiene and vaccine hesitancy, as only 1 in 3 globally and in Malaysia mentioned that they will take the vaccine as soon as possible. The impetus is hence on the government, employees, as well as the media to provide information about the vaccine from credible sources, correct misinformation, as well as educate the rakyat on how to practice good information hygiene to ensure the right path forward for pandemic recovery. Amidst these challenges, one thing has never been more clear: the mandate for businesses to act beyond the business. After a year of unprecedented disaster and turbulence, the COVID-19 pandemic and economic crisis, the 2021 Trust Barometer reveals that business and NGOs are the two most trusted information institutions in Malaysia. While the world seems to be clouded by mistrust and misinformation, there is a glimmer of hope in business. This year's study shows that business not only is the most trusted institution among the 4 studied, but it is also the only trusted institution with a 61 trust level globally. In fact, business is the only institution that is seen as both competent and ethical, moving up from last year together with NGOs when it was seen as competent but not ethical. And because people are far more likely to trust things that are familiar and local, trust in my employer has proven to be a beacon of trust. Employers are trusted in all but one country, with stable or rising levels of trust level year on year, in spite of the volatility that we are seeing in the other institutions. In the prior year's results, business and NGOs were the most trusted institution, tying at 69 points, followed by government and media. This year, however, there is a renewed focus on employers and not just business institutions at large. The pandemic has marked a major shift in employer-employee interaction, and employers must contend with the fact that the work landscape has dramatically changed. In this media landscape, it is stunning that today the most believable source of information is employer communications. When asked which kind of communication would be believed when repeated just once or twice or even less, my employer communications scored the highest at 66%, higher than government communications or traditional media reports. We could draw parallels to the fact that in a remote working environment, Malaysians are connected more than ever to their organization's owned channels, including their company intranet, highlighting the key role internal communications will be in engaging employees. Once again, we see employees in a key position to solve problems by providing trustworthy information amidst a raging infodemic. But as they say, talk is not enough. In fact, today, a business must take action before it talks if it is to remain credible. And this is where we have another stunning finding. The greatest opportunity for business to gain trust is by performing well as a guardian of information quality, ensuring that only reliable, trustworthy information is being shared and consumed. Other key trust building actions so that people are looking for business to act for the long term, embracing sustainability and focusing on long-term thinking over short-term profits, in addition to delivering a more robust response to COVID and driving economic prosperity. It really is an examination of conscience of the employee and their expectations of business. The results show that companies also have a responsibility to fill the information void when the news media is failing to supply accurate information, a sentiment that 50% of respondents globally agree with. In Malaysia, experts and peers remain the most credible spokespeople, with traditional providers of information such as government officials and journalists reclaiming some of the trust equity lost in last year's results. With still work to be done for being comprehensive trusted by the Malaysian general public. Now we move to Malaysians and their attitudes towards a new working environment. More Malaysians are choosing to work from home. Results reveal that 69% of Malaysian respondents prefer to work from home due to fears of contracting COVID during the commute or at the office. The remaining 31% who prefer to return to office stated that they choose to do so as they felt more productive. As Malaysia's national immunization program kicks off and employees begin to return to work, employers must consider how the pandemic has impacted employee expectations, and efforts to keep employees engaged and motivated to turn up physically at work will be crucial for maintaining a productive workforce. Next slide, please. Let's look at the shift in expectations for employers. When asked to consider a potential employee and whether each consideration has become more or less important to them since last year, we see a dramatic net gain in job skills training programs and expectations of employees that their employers will do all they can to keep them safe. This shift corresponds with job fears driven by workplace layoffs and furloughs over the past year. More than half of respondents have seen their work hours reduced or their jobs eliminated as a result of the pandemic. 65% of respondents worry that the pandemic will accelerate the rate at which companies replace human workers with AI and robots. So there's a real fear among employees. With the right synergy, business, NGOs, and government can steer the transformation needed across the nation's workforce. One example of how a public-private partnership can upskill employees is Microsoft's Women at Microsoft initiative in collaboration with MDEC. Separately, the Digital Skills and Gig Economy Employability Program with social enterprise BGBG demonstrates how NGOs and business can tap on each other's strengths to deliver programs needed to future-proof our workforce. So the 2021 edition of the Trust Barometer has also revealed that CEOs, leaders of companies, play a major role in the country's road to recovery, with 80% of Malaysians agreeing that CEOs should step in when the government does not fix societal problems. When government is absent or ineffective, people expect business to step in to fill the void. 79% agree that CEOs should take the lead on change rather than waiting for government to impose it, and 71% believe that CEOs should hold themselves accountable to the public, not just to a board of directors or stakeholders. As one of the institutions that is trusted to be competent, business is expected to play a leading role in addressing challenges beyond the business itself. As we've seen many companies step up, collaborate with government and NGOs to do exactly this during the pandemic. Some examples include Maybank's COVID-19 financial relief scheme and contribution of 40 million ringgit to Mercy Malaysia's COVID relief fund, discounts provided by Tenaga Nasional to their customers during the pandemic, and even Selangor's Sesama Mara program, which includes a plumber apprentice program and free plumbing services to families from the B40 categories. But business cannot go at it alone. It must partner with other institutions to address societal challenges, and crucially, it must also ensure that both consumers and employers have a seat at the table. Nearly 8 in 10 agree that consumers have the power to force corporations to change, and more than 7 in 10 believe the same is true for employees. People believe that they should not only be heard, but also have their voices contribute to decisions that are made in a company. Activism is on the rise on the workplace, and employees say they are far more likely to speak up. 50% of those who are employed agree that they are more likely today than a year ago to voice their objections and engage in workplace protests if they strongly disagree with a company action or policy. And CEOs must lead on societal issues. Business leaders must set the tone, with 92% saying that they expect CEOs to publicly speak out on challenges such as the pandemic impact, job automation, and local community issues. It is evident that societal leaders must lead with facts and empathy. These leaders are expected to have the courage to communicate transparently and also be able to empathize with and address people's fears. Additionally, it is critical that the four institutions not go at it alone, but instead find a common purpose to take a collective action to solve societal problems together. So, how do we move forward from information bankruptcy? Businesses must embrace its expanded mandate, leading on issues ranging from sustainability to systemic racism to upskilling their employees. Societal leaders must lead with facts and act with empathy. They must have the courage to communicate transparently, but also be able to empathize and address people's fears. Third, we must work together to provide trustworthy information that is truthful, unbiased, and most importantly, reliable. The fact that all institutions in Malaysia are seen as trusted points to a cohesion and alignment for a collaborative way forward. So the foundations are set. And the mandate from the Malaysian public is clear. Institutions must partner with one another to solve issues. Business, government, media, and NGOs must find a common purpose, take collective action to address inequalities, starting with foundational problems, particularly in times of turbulence and volatility. Trust is what holds a society together, and where growth rebuilds and rebounds. There has been an examination of conscience of the Malaysian public, and the institutions now must take note and work together to move forward. So look, that was a gist of the Malaysian findings. Thank you again for making the time this morning. I will pass you on to Sophia to introduce our esteemed panel who will help put some context around some of these trends. Sophia, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Based on the results shared, I am sure you're eager to hear the thoughts of our esteemed panelists. Before I pass the floor to Melissa, don't forget to drop your questions in the Q&A box and we will address them during the session later. Today's panel theme, Understanding Empathy and Information Transparency as the New Trust Builders for Malaysians, will be moderated by Melissa Idris, Senior Editor at Astro Awani and anchor of the news talk show called Consider This. Melissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Thanks for that. Thank you so much, Sophia. Thanks for that. Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, over the next hour or so, we're going to be delving into some of the results that we've learned this morning from Edelman's Trust Barometer, particularly for Malaysia. And also, we're going to be discussing what we need to do to rebuild that trust, not just as citizens and consumers, but also as leaders within our organizations, our community, and our communities. So we're going to be delving into all of that, but allow me to introduce our distinguished panelists today. Let me begin with Datuk Nora Abdul Manaf, a Group Chief Human Capital Officer of Maybank. She's been in the role since September 2008. And Datuk Nora is involved or chairs several national level committees and holds several board memberships, including Board of Ethical General Insurance and MBB Labs in Bangalore. And she's also very active in her quest to make a difference to empower women. She's the executive sponsor of Maybank's Women Mentor Women Council, an initiative that really recognizes the importance of access to women mentors for budding corporate women. Delighted to have her here this morning. And to her left, we have Dr. Jasmine Begum, Director of Legal, Corporate and Government Affairs for ASEAN and New Markets for Microsoft. In this role, Dr. Jasmine has held it since 2010, and she oversees corporate affairs, government relations, policy engagement for Microsoft in the ASEAN region. And Dr. Jasmine joins Microsoft with 20 years of experience in combining legal and policy engagement with communications, which is a very nice mix. And her stints include working with the UNDP and the UN Executive Office of the Secretary General in New York. So welcome, Dr. Jasmine. And last but not least, Gregory Ho, who is research associate at Kazana Research Institute. His field of interest is complexity economics, which is based on the premise that all economic agents are constantly evolving and that they change their actions and their strategies in response to the outcomes that they create. So Gregory recently wrote some research, or wrote a paper that approaches the information disorder, the classification of information disorder on Malaysian Twitter. So it's going to be interesting to hear a little bit more about that as we commence our conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, as Sophia mentioned just now, you too can get involved in this panel discussion. So go ahead and type in any questions that you might have throughout, after Chris's presentation a bit earlier, and questions that you would like our panelists to address. Type that into the chat box and we will try our very best to incorporate it into our discussion this morning. Feel free to do that throughout the hour and we'll take them as they come. All right, so if I may begin our conversation, let's begin with Gregory first, okay? And I want to touch a little bit on the work that you're doing within this space, particularly in relation to what Edelman has shown in its Trust Barometer results for 2021, the Trust Inequality Gap. Let's begin with that. So what struck me the most was that the results for Malaysia show that our trust inequality is at a record gap. So the inequality gap between the rising distrust amongst the affluent, more informed public and the mass public. And I'm wondering if you had any thoughts about that. Why is it there's such a big difference between these two segments?
Okay. I guess let's begin by thinking about how would trust be, how would you gain trust, essentially. So a brief review of the literature suggests that there are two types of trust. One is process-based trust and the other is institutional-based trust. Now the process-based trust is something that you get by repeated interactions with stakeholders. So these repeated interactions will sort of give you a feel on whether they are responsive, whether they care for you, they are competent or not. And while the institutional-based trust is more of your expectation on whether people do the right thing, whether people are transparent. And these are sort of like the things that gives a person trust. So I guess maybe perhaps the reason why there is a rising inequality, a rising disparity between the affluent educated class versus the rest of the Malaysian population is because they perhaps face a different set of realities, if I must say. So if one is educated, the probability or the likelihood of you facing a lot of hardships given the pandemic is not as pronounced as if you were to come from the perhaps if you're less educated. So maybe that is one reason why there is a rising disparity in this trust.
Right. Could I ask Dr. Jasmine if there is a tech dimension to this? Is there a tech dimension to the inequality between trust? The more affluent segment of population online, perhaps a bit more digital literate versus the mass population. Do you think there is a dimension there?
Absolutely. Thank you, Melissa. I think we are faced today with abundance of information. And I don't think we have come to a stage we have become discerning on how we consume this information, right? If you look at the different demographics, and I think Gregory spoke about this, affluent information, those who are information poor versus those who are, who have access to this information, I would like to think the way we consume is that there's a lot of clickbait, headlines. We live in a swipe world, right? And with the clickbait that is out there, we tend to, we have now live in a world where we swipe and we read the headline, we draw our conclusion and we move on. Many of us do not go to the source. And therefore, what is presented to us is at the first instance taken as truth, unless you take time to delve in and decide. Versus those who do not have that access, right? The social media platform today has become citizen journalism, right? Like anyone can write and anyone can sort of come with a conclusion and, change the face of communications. I think the challenge is how do we educate our public, both the discerning and those who have access to information, verify. At the end of the day, the duty is as much on those who produce this communication, this information, and it is on the person who's consuming this information.
Okay. I really like that point, and I'm going to circle back to that because we're going to talk a little bit about the infodemic and our information diet. So we'll come back to that. But I wanted to ask Datuk Nora, one of the other results that I thought was particularly interesting was that the most believable source of information is employer communications. That really struck me. So if I may just repeat very quickly, when asked which type or which kind of communication would be believed when repeated just once or twice or even less, my employer communications was what scored the highest, 58%. That's higher than government communications, that's higher than traditional media reports. So employers play a really key role in this. And what did you make when you read that? What do you think is behind this level of trust towards employers' communications?
Right, Melissa, I think to answer your question, I'm going to probably expand it a little bit, both in terms of scope as well as timelines. Now, firstly, the statement I'm about to make might attract different reactions, but we can all agree, I think, that there's always two schools of thoughts on every position, right, on every fact. But my take to that is that way back in 2007, 2008, the last economic crisis, right? That was the beginning of an accelerated reflection for businesses, right? It's really the time when a lot more of the businesses were taking social responsibility even more seriously, right? And since then has been working really hard, very diligently, to ensure that we not only regain the trust post the economic crisis, but also to take the lead, so to speak, and get ahead, right? But also then digitalization was right smack in our faces, right? So it wasn't a choice really, right? But it was a good situation to be in. So I think, and since then, a whole lot of things have been put in place that takes care of the governance in businesses, from a review of the right policies to the process, but even to the establishment of whistleblower committees and channels in businesses, right, that allows the society to have direct communications with the business without having to go through our corporate affairs and so forth, right? So I think we've earned that credibility, and credibility really is the foundation of trust, right? So that will be my response really. It's not something that we've just taken on recently. in fact, just before before COVID-19 hit us, right? There was a whole lot more already. If everybody were to look at what the businesses were investing in terms of making sure that, like Maybank, right? In making sure that all our people, and we've got 43,000 people, are more digital literate and hence more digitally responsible, right? But you have to start with literacy, right? And so they are not suspicious and of things that they don't know, but they know a lot better, what the tools are that they can use. So it's a whole host of a build-up since the last.
Okay, so that earned credibility was a long time in the making.
Yeah.
But if I may just follow up very quickly with the past year. So with that kind of earned credibility, and then businesses had to take on the mantle of informing the employees, the family that of the organization, how to deal with this. Yeah. Because again, if we remember, the past year, communications with government was also with SOPs, and it was a bit shaky in the beginning. Yes. Employers had to step into that role. Can you share a little bit about how Maybank had to step up and fill that void?
We did, we most certainly did, and I just have to share this really, because it was way back in February, and we decided, it will enhance the response that but in February we decided we needed to take temperatures of everybody. We didn't know what we didn't know, right? We knew about Wuhan, we knew about Italy, but we were like everybody else, right? But we knew we needed to take action, and we were not sure because there was very little information going around. So we actually rented huge, thermometer sets that are those that you go through in the airports, right? Because at that time I don't think they've imported the handheld ones yet, right? And then everybody in town talked about, something's happening in Maybank, so that is to underscore the fact that we actually took a whole lot of actions right from the very beginning. Now in February as well, immediately, almost in parallel to that, we went back to basics. We said, how do we protect our people, right, in the midst of not knowing what exactly is happening? But what we knew was hygiene needs to be topmost in everybody's mind. So you can check the social media, because we actually launched a fun competition, who's got the most pledges, basic pledging of when I sneeze, I'm going to close my mouth. Cover my mouth. You were
going back to basics to teach people basic hygiene.
Yes. And then immediately we had daily, we call it MCOMs internally, daily employee communications, right up to today. Right? It's daily, and it is released in 2 versions. One via computer, so they can access via computer. But there are many who cannot access at home, so it's also mobile friendly. So it's sent through mobile, right? So those are some things that we've invested in, and one of the things that we took action on is then March came, right? And then it was like MCO, essential services can still go ahead their business as usual, but then we took stock of things again and said, hey, we're a bank, we're essential services, but no way, Jose, are we going to be allowing all our staff to go to the office, right? Even though we could. So first day, second day, of course, we were still thinking about what to do. So first, second day, we were 80% on site. But by the time it was the end of the week, it was a total flip. 80% was from home, working from home, and with no disruption to our services and so forth. So, I'm actually very happy that we were able to do it.
Well, this is a great example of how trust is built based on what Gregory was mentioning, process-based trust, right? This is decisive, quick action that builds trust in employees. So, Dr. Jasmine, if I may come to you, working with a big organization similarly, how did Microsoft deal with that? And do you see that also reflected in the level of trust between employer and employee?
Absolutely. What we saw was very decisive move from corporate headquarters, where while the subsidiary in country was empowered to make that decision, the transition was made fairly simple for us. I have never had, since I joined Microsoft in the last 11 years, had my reporting manager in country. They have either sat in Singapore, Korea, or somewhere else.
Right.
So I didn't have to work from the office, but I made, sitting in the leadership role, I made sure I was present to support the team. But the transition, I must say, was very much anchored on people first. Their safety, their family's safety. That's how it was a lot of trust, a lot of engagement, where the leaders took time to thank family members on Friday, where we would have pet parades, where they would talk to our children and our parents to say, thank you, it is not easy, we recognize, but thank you for the support. Not only giving that flexibility to the employee, but also that this change dynamic from work from home. I have my mother at home who is not sure, is she really doing work? How is it that she's at home and doing work? But that engagement where leaders took the time, managers took the time to engage with teams. I was very fortunate, like Dr. Nora, I would like to share my story, where the president of Microsoft Corporation, Brad Smith, who is the head of legal, one day my manager said, I need to speak to you at 8 in the morning, be online, camera on. I said, yeah, sure. Not scrambling to put on my tudung, but there I was, I have a set of slides, typical Microsoft, I have a deck to go, just in case she needed something. The call started, and I had Brad Smith, who's the president of the company, appear on my screen and said, I'm Teams bombing you to give you an award. Like, I was so taken aback. So this man goes around the world handing out awards to employees who, like, he just Teams bombed.
That is amazing.
That's right. I was shocked. I was lost for word, of course, not expecting Brad to turn.
Congratulations on your award, by the way.
But the thing is, that small thing, yeah, that, it keeps the morale up, especially when you are screen fatigued, when you are exhausted with, moving, you are moving from one call to another. It's blurred days. You start at 5 in the morning, you finish at 10 at night. But that kind gesture of having the top brass of the company just turning up to say, thank you, you have done an amazing job.
And his midnight perhaps.
It was late for him, right? And it was 8 in the morning, probably it is after, yeah. But the point is that it is not just about putting in processes, but continued engagement to reinforce that trust, entirely built on empathy.
That's wonderful, and echoes what Dr. Nora said about protecting people first, right? That comes first and foremost. And I want to bring Gregory into the conversation and ask you the implications of this, right? So if communications from employers is what people trust the most, what responsibility then do employers have to be guardians of information quality? Because that's now a role that businesses will have to play, but also this wonderful opportunity. If there is such a level of trust in employers, how do we ensure that businesses play a role in, I guess, making sure, in battling that infodemic that Christopher spoke of a bit earlier?
So I guess if employees trust their employers a lot when it comes to the internal circulars and whatnot, it falls upon the employers, it is then the employer's responsibility to be able to communicate information in an accurate way. What we see a lot in the news when there is something, when something becomes viral, it is often the result of poor communication on behalf of let's say the employer. And I guess employers now have this responsibility to be able to communicate in a way that the word that we want to use is they have empathy, right? So employers must be able to empathize with, number one, how their employees feel, but not only the employees, but also the general public as a larger stakeholder. Right. And I think this is becoming increasingly more prominent in an age where you have citizen journalism, where everybody has a voice in social media.
Well, since you brought up citizen journalism, I'm going to take a quick question. We've got a question here from a member of the audience. Now, moving forward, how can businesses and NGOs work ethically with the media to enhance information hygiene and trust in the broader population? So essentially, how can business interests be separated in this scenario? So we'll take that first, but take that a little bit. But coming to the issue of citizen journalism, in a time when anyone and everyone is a citizen journalist, how can we take steps to combat information disorder? Greg, would you like to take that?
Okay, I think I'll give the same answer to both questions. In my mind, one of the easiest ways to address these issues is to look at the International Fact-Checking Network's 5 principles. Essentially, in order for us to improve in the information ecosystem in Malaysia, we must have a means through which you can assess whether a certain article is informationally hygienic or not. And if I may just read out these principles, they are: number 1, you have to ask whether this article is it a partisan article? Is it an article that favors a certain class or certain political party or group, or is the article fair in what the article is saying? Does this article use the same standards of assessing all the different views there is in this issue? Number 2, do they publish the standards and the transparency of sources? Is this article just a view made by somebody, or is this article based on facts? And can you trace these facts down to where the facts are reported, how the data is being generated, and whatnot? Transparency of funding and organization. Who's funding the publications of this article? Standards and transparency of methodology. How does the author arrive at the conclusion of the article? And most importantly, this is I guess something that we do not really see in this country: open and honest corrections policy. Now we all as humans, we make mistakes. When we make mistakes, do we publish the corrections to our mistakes or not? And in a country where maybe face is a bit more important, we don't really see that.
I completely agree, and if I may add to the answer to the first question, how businesses and NGOs can work together with the media to enhance information hygiene. I think the issue with the media also to be more responsible, to issue corrections when made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, but also not just working with businesses, but also working with government to make sure that headlines are not misrepresentative. That even because many of us read just the headlines sometimes before we actually scroll on. And quick responses from the media and the government and different stakeholders, I think, is also very imperative to building trust. Perhaps that was also why we saw such an erosion of trust in the media in the past year. And it's been a building one, like as you mentioned, it's one that's been in the works for many years, the erosion of trust, and we saw that reflected in the results in the Edelman Trust Barometer of last year. But something Gregory said about the stakeholders of wanting the public to be involved right now. They want a say in the way businesses behave. And I wanted to come back to Datuk Nora about that, because both consumers and employees want a seat at the table now. They want to see businesses go beyond. So I think Christopher said the mandate for businesses now is to act beyond the business. How does that play out in a corporate setting where businesses are responsible to their shareholders, but now we have a more engaged public, we have more activist workplace? How does a corporation, one as large as Maybank, balance that?
Well, Melissa, businesses, Maybank, we're definitely not going to be shirking our responsibilities, right? And that's why I started by saying we've done enough self-reflection post the last economic crisis, and we've put a lot of things in place that's transparent. So the next point is about transparency. So we are very transparent, especially within our sustainability agenda now, right? That most organizations, most good organizations are driving, right? And we are doing a lot more publications, right? Now, so that's one way, one source of how the different stakeholders and the different groups in the ecosystem can play the check and balance role. However, I'd like to also underscore that to respond to Gregory, right, that we shouldn't be asked to take on that responsibility on our own. We are in an ecosystem. All the different parties in the ecosystem needs to actually change your mindsets and get yourselves ready, get everybody ready. We will do our part. We are influencing way beyond, right? And that's why I said you can check whether we're doing the right things because we are a lot more transparent today. Okay. But we have our stakeholders. Many of you listening, many of you here in this room are our shareholders because you're our shareholders. Now you want us to make sure that we also prioritize the health of the organization. So our business interests will always be there, but never at the expense of others. I think that's what I want to respond to that question.
Okay, all right. Dr. Jasmine, can we talk a little bit about the trust in employers versus the trust in government? And you are, I guess, you are straddling both, working in a big multinational corporation, but also being the liaison to government policy and dealing with that. How do you see government, trust and competency builds trust? How do you balance the two, looking from an organizational perspective versus government policy perspective?
I would anchor it on the reputation capital, right? Reputation capital at the end trumps everything else, because whether it's online or offline, some values are timeless, and trust is one of that, right? It's a timeless value. In order for government to trust businesses and for businesses to trust governments, like Dr. Nora said, it is everybody's responsibility. You can't outsource this to just the government having to do, or a research institution, or the business. Everyone in the society has a role to play. And I say this very respectfully, that while people could sit and be critical, and we welcome feedback and perspectives, which are very important, but in order for us to bridge credibility and get to that reputation capital, for the government to trust organizations and for us to trust governments, there has to be a baseline, right? For the government to believe a person coming from Microsoft not to be putting just the business interest, but also putting the nation first. What have I put in place? What have I done? And therefore, that reputation capital becomes such a critical component, because I would be seen to be driving a Microsoft agenda. But if I drive a national agenda that could benefit the nation, by the way, will benefit Microsoft, I gain trust. And the reputation is, yes, she's no nonsense, but she will do right. Right? So we then go back to some of these values. Trust is, if you look at a social miracle today, you would stop at the traffic light. How do I know that you will stop? That's a social miracle.
Yes, smiling.
Yes, we all signed that social contract. Right. But if I may very quickly follow up with you, one of the results, again, that struck me particularly was 83% of the respondents believe that CEOs should step in when the government does not fix societal problems. 79% agree that CEOs should take the lead on change rather than wait for the government to fix it. Is this an unfair burden to place on CEOs? And are the expectations so overwhelming to place CEOs into this position where they're now expected to fix societal problems? Or is that just a void in terms of leadership and the earned credibility of corporates and CEOs filling that void?
I think over time, increasingly, we have seen CEOs making a stand. We have seen this with Satya Satya Nadella or Brad Smith, where we have been strong voice for advocacy, especially when it comes to privacy and security. The expectation that those of us in a certain field are expected to champion the right cause beyond what is within our parameters. I think if we could bring societal change and influence good, all of us have a duty. And I want to not just say that it's the role of CEOs, but power is not in position.
Right.
Power is in making the difference the right way. But CEOs are in the position of power to advocate for good. Your question is that unfair? I think many CEOs today have stepped up, right? And I think we need to encourage. I think we have CEOs who really care for societal need and make a difference. And we have seen this during the pandemic, where they have all stepped up to make a difference, to contribute to the community in building resilience, and I think that is very important. And the expectation also is because we live in a connected world. So there is that, I would not say it's unfair, but I would come back to say it's a shared value.
Right. Connected world, meaning that everything we do is now obvious to everyone, right? So
there is transparency.
And the silence can also be quite deafening, right?
Quite deafening, I agree with you.
Okay. Dr. Nora, same question to you. Do you, in terms of 71% of people believing that CEOs should hold themselves accountable to the public and not just to the board of directors and shareholders, expectations of CEOs needing to solve all of society's problems, is that unfair in your point of view?
Your last point, yes, it is unfair. But no, as Dr. Jasmine said, yeah, with power comes responsibility, right? So again, nobody should shirk that. In fact, I would like to take this opportunity to caution all of us to be careful, right? Because just over the last week, there was two contradicting positions or calls taken by two CEOs. One saying when he was asked about what do you expect in terms of the changes in the workplace and society, and he says, well, for a start, we are a work from office organization. Okay, so I think that's not inclusive, right? Because one of the biggest lessons for me, there's a lot of silver linings with COVID-19, to be honest, yes. With along with all the pain and the sufferings, but and one of that really is diversity and inclusivity at its core. Not everybody is suited for work from home. Yes, but then a lot more people understand what work from home really means, right? And they didn't pre-COVID. And with that, you understand, what we already understood for centuries, that people are different. And yet, rules, regulations, processes treat everybody homogeneously, right? So if someone can work at his own, time and space and so forth, why would you worry, right? And one of the research findings says, $600 billion, and this is US dollars, sorry, $600 billion is lost because and caused by workplace distractions, right?
Right.
So, come on, we all know that. And what do? We try to fix those, the people, and not take them away from those distractions. So this is going to take me a whole day talking about this, right?
That's fine.
But making flippant, or not flippant, but too strong, don't be too sure. I think the best thing is don't be too sure, right? And that's the other lesson that COVID has taught us, right? Never say never, right? So I think it's responsible to truly be inclusive and speak to the different types of audience, so that you then are responsible to coach them to try to sort the problem. Now, at this point, I do need to again mention what Einstein said, right? Because that will be the bane of our, whether we can rebuild better or otherwise, okay, post-COVID. what did Einstein say? He said something to the effect of, we can't solve a problem, that we created, using that same mindset that we created the problem, right? So what building back better, and to me that's not just a trendy phrase. I believe in it, right? And we have to work hard towards rebuilding better. And one of the things that we have to do to be able to rebuild better is not to hold on to what was pre-COVID and then make those comparisons, based on that as the base, right? So I think what we need to do really is to be open to new ideas. For example, creating jobs. Yes, of course, we are very responsible, and we've got the track record. So I will not, apologize for saying this, because we do, right? However, jobs, what does that mean? Sustainability means people can earn an income, right? And their well-being is taken care of. That may or may not equate a full-time job as defined today. So that to me is one of the things that CEOs, businesses can probably take the lead, but we need the government on this. We need society on this. Because for a long time, parents and society disrespected people who didn't have a full-time job. Not knowing that these people who are gigging here and there and putting, and doing a bit of a business here and there are earning so much more than a person with a permanent job, fresh grad, let's say, right? So it does require different economic models, different business models, but don't forget societal models.
Yes, a new mindset, a new kind of society, a culture that is embracing of this new gig economy. I'm going to just take a quick break here. Remind everyone that you can keep sending in your questions. Type them into the chat box, and we will send them to our panelists for their answers. You can also specify if you want to direct a question to a specific panelist. Let me pivot the conversation very quickly here to address once again the infodemic and particularly information disorder and how we can improve our hygiene diet. One of the things that the Trust Barometer found was that they measured how well respondents practiced good information hygiene. And what they found alarmingly was that only 29% of us practice good information hygiene. So I wanted to come back to how we can build trust and improve our information diet. Gregory, this is going to come to you. One of the things that was mentioned in the presentation a bit earlier was the personal responsibility versus policy intervention. Where do you see that balance between our individual responsibility to make sure that we are verifying information and doing all the things that you listed out for us versus a institutional policy framework?
I guess this is one of the more difficult questions where I don't think the world has an answer to yet. I think platforms like Facebook or Twitter, they are positioning themselves as platforms to move away, so as to not call themselves journalists or traditional media. I think in traditional media, if you were to post something or you were to publish something that is defamatory or false, legal action can be taken. So in a world where you have citizen journalism, where people create thousands and perhaps hundreds of thousands of posts or tweets every single day, is it fair for us to place the burden on platforms to do fact-checking? And if so, what are the necessary conditions for them to do that? Is it even a humanly possible task? So I guess we are sort of caught in this situation where this problem of an infodemic is not so easily solvable. However, I would say that parts of my research into this issue indicate that there are some mathematical or data science methods that you can easily employ to aid with perhaps the tagging or the classification of such misinformation or information disorder. And I think I mean, in the past, it would be difficult to do, but in a world now where you have cloud computing, you can provision these things quite easily on the cloud with perhaps less than 60 lines of code.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And I guess as more and more people go into this area where we experiment with new methodologies to sort of help the human task of identifying the infodemic, maybe one day this problem can be more effectively managed. So I guess there is also a discussion in the Trust Barometer just now that people feel as if their jobs are going to be one day replaced by AI. But how I envision how do I put this? The movement of the industry into this IR 4.0 and the use of data science methods is that AI doesn't really replace jobs, but they mainly replace tasks, or they automate them with greater efficiency.
True.
So if we are able to come up with apps or methods that can sort of like ease the workload of the human still has a role to play, but only now it is sort of like a human and machine symbiosis that and I guess this would perhaps be one of the other ways forward, and it's for everybody to do, as you have rightly mentioned.
Could I also ask you about that paper you wrote about classification of information disorder, and you looked specifically at the Malaysian Twitter space, which is you are a brave man to do such a thing. Could you tell us very quickly, what is it about, what did you find out in terms of classification of information disorder within the Malaysian Twitter space? Because you looked at a specific COVID-19 patient.
That's right.
Right. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so this might be a long conversation, but I'll try to make it short.
Cliff notes, please.
Well, so I think in the earlier part of 2020, we were looking at, there was a lot of news about how information disorder or misinformation is very rampant on social media, and this has a lot of different effects on different countries like Myanmar or in the United States. So we were interested to look at whether humans view information disorder in the same way as the machine, as how a data science method would do it. And the reason why this is so is because if they do it in a similar way, then perhaps the method can be used to augment the task, and that was mainly why we did the study the way we did it. It's to explore the capability of the machine to do it. But however, I would say that the findings is mixed. Humans can assess the dimension of falseness with greater certainty and with greater consistency. That means if you get 7 people to look at a particular article, and this article contains some level of falsehood, humans can identify that very clearly. However, humans cannot identify intent with consistency. So if this article has intent to harm a certain individual, different people looking at it may arrive at different conclusions as to whether intent is present or not.
So does that mean that tech can outperform human ability to identify intent?
I think at this point it is a bit too early
to tell. As artificial intelligence grows, I'm sure we'll find out more. We're going to take questions very shortly. Thank you for sending them all in. We'll take it in a little bit, but I do want to ask Dr. Jasmine very quickly about one of the things. So that the theme of our panel discussion is leadership with empathy, and one of the things that the Barometer told us was that contracting COVID was actually not at the top of people's worries. Rather, a larger percentage of them were worried about job losses, but also, interestingly, cybersecurity and climate change. How do you see that? I mean, does that, as a tech company yourself, do you see is enough being done to address the concerns about cybersecurity? It was, for me, a bit of a revelation to find out that people were actually quite concerned about this. And I do want to come to Datuk Nora as well. Being a bank, cybersecurity will be very important. But let's go to Jasmine first.
I want to address that concern, and that's a real concern. Running one of the largest cloud computing infrastructure in the world, for us, cybersecurity is by design. It's not an afterthought. Both privacy and security is built into our products by design. The fact that it has become apparent to people during the pandemic is because of the shift from the way we started living, right? The lockdown forced us to move online.
Right.
And we have seen quite a bit of security breaches, especially in the healthcare sector. As we were monitoring the cybersecurity attack during the last 1 year, we did realize that, the bomb, from using of different virtual conference tools, which, led to some school students who were getting bombed online, and all of those, there was suddenly that critical awareness of how do I keep the family safe, all of our different connected world safe, and that's a valid one. As Microsoft, we have continued to advocate not only about, talking about the security that's built in, but how to keep your children safe online, how do you keep your family safe online. I think we are living in a world with digital natives, right, who are aware, and we have people who are learning about these new technologies and trying to keep their home safe and their children safe and their work environment safe. And there is still a gap of awareness. And I think Microsoft, I think I've seen this online in Maybank to you, where constant reminder.
Yes, the pop-ups that remind you.
Right?
Yes.
But I think more needs to be done. Right now, I think the banks are the only ones who are popping up with those reminders.
Oh, okay, so it should go beyond financial services.
Simple things like putting a sticker on your camera when you are not using, how it could be tabbed. I think there is a duty for all of us to raise that awareness. And I think more needs to be done. But it became into sharp focus only because people realized they were working from home and they were not getting the support.
Right. Did you see an increase in people's concerns about cybersecurity? I mean, financial services, of course, at the forefront of ensuring security in online transactions. But did you notice that in the past year, as we became more digital, our lives more digitally, incorporated, did Maybank experience that?
Well, I think as Dr. Jasmine pointed out, because we've been actively educating our 22, 23 million customers, sounds like including you.
I am, yes. One of the 22.
Fabulous, thank you. We were able to pivot quite fast. Remember I said just now when we had 80% of our people stay at home and there were no disruptions. Everybody went on our digital banking platform, right? And I think in the third month, we also rolled out for SME, right? So I think people do trust the fact that we've put the internal securities in place, and they know that we've been keeping them on top of things, right? I think it's working much better in the financial sector.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Because I was quite surprised to see cybersecurity so high up there, even above contracting COVID. But it really is because, as Dr. Jasmine pointed out, so much of our lives are online right now. And particularly in the last year, we've been forced to move online. Let's take a couple of questions here. Let's go to question number 5, please, if we may, and have a look. It's a question for Dr. Jasmine. What must the government do to ensure trust equity built as a result of assertive action in handling the pandemic, and that's continued and is maintained?
I think transparent engagement is critical, right? We talk about stakeholder management, stakeholder engagement. The people are the most important stakeholder for the government, and they want to know the fact. They want to. I think some of the SOPs that the government has put in place, right? The daily briefing by the minister and the daily briefing by the Ministry of Health. I think at the outset it helps, but then it come to a point of fatigue, right? I think what is important is they not only want to have numbers reported. I think it's important that the government says what do they have in place for the recovery. We know that this is going to take time. People want to be assured. People want to be engaged, right? As discerning citizens, they want to be engaged, and given that there is so much presence, just like the politicians and the government uses social media, people too use social media, and I think this has actually bridged the engagement opportunity that was not present before. You know, there used to be a time you have to go and visit your member of parliament. Right. You can now engage online and
just tag them.
Yeah, right. Just tag them. But the point is transparency. Being transparent. Trust equates responsibility. Yeah. Being responsible, right? If I can trust you, I trust you because I know you'll be responsible, right? So it comes back to my reputation capital, right? The return of investment of trust is influence.
There was another question, if I may scroll down to question towards the end. There was one question that asked, is there a possibility for trust to be misplaced? And that comes to you. So trust equals responsibility in the reputational capital that you mentioned a bit earlier. Is it possible to have misplaced trust and to, you're hoping for responsibility and accountability and competency, but that trust is misplaced? What then happens? What are the consequences of that, particularly for government?
I think it's at the expense of reputation, because the trust value, the value of trust is return of influence, right? Being able to influence someone who follows you is quite straightforward. Being able to influence someone who doesn't believe in you is a superpower, right?
That's amazing.
Right? So to me, return of influence is what you're putting with trust. And if that is broken, to rebuild, to me, and I like to come back to this reputation capital, because that is something that you cannot, that's a capital that you draw on. And I think banks have done that. I'm one of the 23 million. and
I will shake your hand before COVID.
Because there is comfort. I'm going to endorse a branch, KLCC branch. Right, I bank with one branch because of that trust. And that comes with the reputation. I know come rain, shine, pandemic, I can trust and go, right? So I want to come back. Credibility, transparency, and the return of trust, the ROI here is influence.
It's amazing. Reputational capital takes so long to build, but can be lost so quickly.
So vulnerable, it's easy to break.
And I have to say, I completely agree with you that, for businesses particularly, trust is the currency, right? You're really seeing that. Okay, there's a question for Dr. Nora, so let's come to that question. As part of the Maybank Exco, what role does the board play in ensuring CEOs lead their organizations to look beyond their immediate stakeholder universe and think, quote unquote, beyond the business?
Okay. You might want my number after this, but anyway, I'm going to be answering in general. Well, boards have fiduciary duty, right? Board members know the role that they're supposed to play. And with sustainability, as I mentioned, even more so, it's not just about business, right? There's an famous quote by, I think it was Larry Fink or someone, right? You do good, the money will come, right? So I think predominantly everyone's on board. And if you talk about banking, because you specifically asked about Maybank, in banking it's even more so because board members of banks, have to go for training. However qualified they are, they go for, but it's mandatory by the central bank, right? So back to school, go through a whole week, and you do not get your certificate. These are very, very strict, professors. You don't get your certificate if you miss one class. They make you come back. So I'll reassure you that, you know, the board members would know what to do.
Okay, all right then. I hope that answers your question. Thank you for asking that. Let's come to question number 10. Malaysia specifically, is no secret that the media has not had it easy. Recent Media Freedom Index put Malaysia on the 119th spot out of 130 countries. Yes, that's quite dismal ranking, I have to admit. And also, taking another question at one go, following the question above, what can we do to improve our position here so that trust in the media can be regained? Any role that technology can play? I'll weigh in on that in a little later, but I do want to hear from Gregory and maybe Dr. Jasmine, if you have anything to weigh in on this, please feel free. Greg, how would you respond to some of this? I mean, it's not a pretty picture at the moment to be, you know, ranked so poorly in terms of media freedoms.
Although I did not study this specifically, but we can see recent events in Malaysia, for example, with Malaysia Kini and the court finding that happened. One would wonder that in this digital age of perhaps citizen journalism, is how would you place the burden of responsibility, and who is this? Who has to bear this burden of paying a fine or being responsible when there are certain elements of malicious intent or even falsehoods present in your platform or your portal? But concerning the follow-up, can technology play a role in making the situation better? I think it can, because I've read the majority and minority judgments of the Malaysia Kini case, and it seemed that they sort of had this filter where you can sort of filter words, and based on that filter you can sort of detect when the presence of all these malicious posts, however you want to quantify them. But I think the use of technology, especially with more sophisticated methods, can perhaps do a better job in identifying these occurrences. But I would say that there is no foolproof, at least not to my knowledge. I don't think there is a foolproof
one silver bullet yes, exactly. Can I ask you, I mean, given that so much of news media is now digital and online, and the lines are somewhat blurred between traditional media outlets and social media. Has social media done a lot to erode the trust in media institutions? You have media headlines or news headlines tweeted and retweeted and shared on Facebook and other social media outlets, and that's almost the responsibility of the news organization, but yet shared by the mass populace.
That's right.
Without any fact checking or even reading beyond the headlines.
Yes, exactly.
Do you think that's the case?
I do think that's the case. In fact, what is very interesting about social media is that if you compare it to the traditional media, the media outlets are responsible for what they publish, and they have control over meaning and content. But in this world of social media, anybody can sort of tag on the original content and sort of change it to whatever they want to communicate, right? They can insert a meme, they can insert their own a cynical remark, and
it changes the narrative and the tone.
Yes. Exactly. So it's not a situation where, when we say media, we refer to this blanket, media, like everything can be considered media. But we have to recognize that media today is very different than how it was 10 years ago.
Yes, definitely.
Can I weigh in on that very quickly? Because something, quite recent, because I think that's a good thing as well, that it can be tagged on, it can be, because recently, I won't name the bank, but media was very cheeky here, right? The headline was, this bank accorded 98 increments to 98% of the population, and it created a lot of uproar, and because the different stakeholders were concerned, or then we had people questioning the other banks. But then it didn't become an issue because level-minded people, wise people, then tacked onto it, you know, and said, that's impossible, you know, so yeah. So the wisdom from the better, the more responsible public.
Right. So there are some silver linings to the democratization of social media, because you're not the smartest person in the room. Media's not the smartest person in the room often, and you have the experts weighing in. Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Jasmine, would you like to weigh in on that, particularly the tech dimension? You know, when we're on Twitter sometimes and we're retweeting a headline, the pop-up suggests, would you like to read this article first before retweeting it? And that's perhaps one way for, you know, good information hygiene. Do you see a tech dimension in terms of building or rebuilding eroded trust in media?
I can't speak to social media, but I would like to tap on what Gregory said about, you know, the democratization of big data and artificial intelligence, where it becomes more accessible, that we would be able to use technology to vet and see whether the validity of it. Right now, if I look at a headline and you know, whether you want to click, so headlines are clickbaits. Headlines are written for you to click. It's a clickbait, right? The story inside could be dull, but the headlines are written for clicks. So the source of that information, how do we now, is there a way with technology to give a star rating? Right? I don't know, but this could be the future, whether the validity of the media, if a media has been dinged many times for misinformation or disinformation, would they not have stars? I think we need to, and I say this often, we live in a digital world with analog policies, and we try to force fit. We now need to build policies ground up for digital world.
Right. That's a really interesting point, and I think I'm hoping that is the way of the future, that, you know, the way to improve our information diet and improve information hygiene is, you know, maybe to have these types of tools that tech enables us to have.
Because not everyone is able to research and find and have
fact check.
And people may not know. And I think the most vulnerable are children and the elderly.
Right.
These are two vulnerable groups in the demographics that we do not do enough to engage and educate. So to me, being able to see is a 1-star or 2-star information, then I want to be able to say that if my child or my mother is reading a news, because I get misinformation at the dining table.
Forwarded messages, you know, that could have a rating.
Correct. At the dining table, I get 80% of misinformation, and then I and I'm going, no, that's not.
So you are the fact checker.
Yes, and I say, so where is your source? So I don't want, but not everyone would be able to do that.
Right.
So we need to be able to have this, when I look at something and I say, okay, it's a bit of a, like you would not go to Airbnb or something without reading the review, right?
Yes,
so how do we now star rate information so that everyone will behave?
I really like that. That's a really
valid
point.
I like that.
Let's take some more questions. Thank you. Keep them coming in. I appreciate everyone who's written in this morning. Now, I'm going to direct this question to Datuk Nora because it talks a little bit about job security. And you mentioned a bit earlier, MIMEC's done a lot to create new jobs. But in building leadership with empathy as the theme of the panel today, one of the main concerns of the respondents of the Edelman Trust Barometer was job losses. So the question is, how do employers assure employees regarding job security? It's something that's hard to guarantee your employees. Should the company be upfront to the employees that due to the pandemic, anything could happen?
That's a trick question. Of course, you have to be upfront with your employees, right? We started our conversation with trust, right, and transparency. But I'd like to, you know, use our example, right? We have never committed that there will not be job losses or changes in jobs, right? But then action speaks louder than words. right? So our employees have seen how we've made sure that we, and this is way back, right, in 2018, when we made a commitment to them and we put our money where our mouth is. We said minimum 70 million will be spent to bring all of you into a minimum level of knowledge and skills to be able to weigh in. I think that's most important. But it takes two to tango, right? Yeah. So we will offer the platform, and that, by the way, is our employer value proposition that we've communicated to our people since 2009. It's go ahead, right? So for us to say go ahead to you, we have to prepare the platform for you, the infrastructure for you. But then you have to, if it's a road, you have to use the road, right? So you have to weigh in. So organizations must be transparent, tell the people what's happening, but then come and help us, right? And I always tell the team, right, we will first, of course, talk about how to make money, okay? Because if we don't make money, we can't even help ourselves. How the heck are we going to help other people, right? And society. And we're 43,000, multiplied by 2 or 3, because many of you are married. We've got mouths to feed, right? And so we have to make money, and we will do that responsibly. And we need you on board, because we don't have all the answers. I'll be the first one to tell them, I don't know, what the actual answer is, but I know what the first step we're going to be doing. And you're going to come in and help me, figure out what the next few steps are going to be. So you have to weigh in. You have to join the whatever programs that your organization is telling you, and give ideas, right?
Be an active participant.
Yes. So Maybank, we actually, for example, recently converted because we are a large organization, we have many dispatches, right? So we've converted them into a new role in the organization. Yeah, so 9 months back to school, right? Yeah, you must at least have basic computer skills, Excel, right? Okay. And they have a role to play, right?
So they've been reskilled and upskilled as well. Which brings me to Dr. Jasmine. Congratulations, Microsoft, on being inking the cloud service provider recently, and also announcing the upskilling or reskilling of 1 million Malaysians under My Digital. That plays a role in the fears of job losses, right? Could you weigh in on that?
Absolutely. To me, every one of us have to be a serial learner. We need to reskill, upskill, unlearn and relearn. As a lawyer who graduated in 1992 from International Islamic University, I had zero tech background. Here I am talking about data science and artificial intelligence. Do not believe me, but we need to be committed about relearning. Microsoft's commitment to upskill and reskill 25 million people worldwide was a commitment that we made. And in Malaysia, we are committing to reskill 1 million people. Why is this important? Jobs in the next normal, that is, we are not going to the old normal. Right. The next normal are going to look new. To your point about reskilling the dispatch, we are in fact offering digital skills in Bahasa. It's now available online in Bahasa too, so that people could learn and it could reach far and wide. But more importantly, people are a renewable resource. The most important resource are people, and they are renewable. And our way of bringing this skilling touches all segments. Those who are high-tech, those who want to go into technology skilling, and those who want to use digital skills just to get on and move up. And I think Melissa saw us engaging with Grab drivers and them being skilled, right? Yes. And the national blind football team, making sure that people with disability are not left behind. I think this skilling, we actually at a point where we could hit refresh, reset, and bring people on board and democratize learning with technology. I think that is one I would like to leave today, is take time to learn, and it is not just organizations. And you said about you have made a platform available Anyone can learn, but it takes two to tango. People must want to learn.
Okay. Well, you know, I really like that the option of upskilling and reskilling will do so much to quell the fears and concerns people have about their jobs being downsized, about taking pay cuts, and I think equipping employees will give, you know, it instills trust, right? So you trust your employer because you think, oh, they're invested in my future, invested in my skills and my talents. So I really like that. Let's take a look at some of the newer questions that have come in as we approach towards the end. We've got a couple more minutes left, and I do want to give the panelists a couple of minutes to give their final takeaways. But let's take a look at question number 12, if I may. Okay, so thank you for the question. That's quite a long question about safekeeping data, customer data in terms of trust, and I think that leads back to our conversation about cybersecurity. Did you want to take that question, or shall we move on? Question about data, Personal Data Protection Act, and using e-payment channels.
I think we might have
covered that. All right, thank you very much for that question. We have covered that a little bit earlier in the conversation about cybersecurity. All right, let's take a quick look. Vaccines are being rolled out, and the question of trust is crucial now, especially among employers. How should organizations deal with differing, often personal viewpoints with regards to getting vaccinated? Ooh, this is a tough one. Dr. Nora, I mean, you know, you lead such a big organization, and you have to deal with many people with differing views. Have you had to address this question with your team?
Well, actually we have, because we commenced our own internal registration, if you like, in parallel with MySejahtera, because we needed to know where our people sit in terms of the subject. We started with about 60% not responding, right? And then we upped the communications and the engagements, and then it improved. It went from 60 to 40%.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you flipped the scales.
Yes, yes. So I think it's giving them a bit of time and a bit more information, and them knowing that they actually have a choice. You know, that builds trust, right? And I think that's our personal, our own internal experience. So we are ready. We're just waiting to press the button. So hello,
congratulations.
One of the institutions, please. Right?
Well, I'm so glad that Maybank has taken a lead in that and helped build vaccine confidence and overcome whatever hesitancy that, you know, some people may still have.
Sorry, and hopefully then they are also doing the same with the neighbors and the community, right? So that it's not just our 43,000.
There's a ripple effect. Yeah. Yes, brilliant. Yeah. Dr. Jasmine, can I ask you about that? The point that was raised about the question of trust and vaccine confidence, particularly now in the national vaccine rollout. How can the government, in your point of view, build that trust very quickly? Whatever trust has been eroded, build it very quickly, because we have no time to lose in the vaccine the rollout. So how would you advise the government if you were?
I think the most important component is the vaccine, information around vaccine is still being communicated to people who have access to information. It's not being brought down to bite size so that the makcik in Cerotok Kun can understand why she needs the vaccination, right? Okay. I think it is critical as we roll out this, we need to address concerns. Telling someone you need to have this vaccination because the government says so will push people away. Yeah. I think the benefits of it, the benefit of one person getting vaccinated in a house, the impact on the household is not being communicated. Why a household in a community being vaccinated has impact on the society is not communicated. And most importantly, the impact on economy, that there is no parallel being drawn. It was a health crisis, which became an economic crisis, which is a societal crisis today. and we need to connect. The problem is today it is being communicated, there's the anti-vaxxers, we need to convince them, and the role of the government is to actually not just show that it is just purely health. Right. There are other, to the point that Datuk made, it's not just about convincing your employee, but that neighborhood and that societal, because at the end of the day, the impact has economic outcome.
Yes, definitely. Well said. All right, panelists, we're coming to the end. We've got 3 minutes left, so I'm gonna go down the panel and perhaps ask you for a minute of your last takeaway. So for the audience watching today, when we're thinking about trust, we've got all the results. We know how much trust has been built and how much trust has been lost. How can we go about regaining lost trust and rebuilding it to be strengthened in the future? Greg, if I may begin with you.
Well, assuming that trust is lost, I think the first step towards rebuilding lost trust is to admit the mistake. It's something that perhaps is quite difficult to do, but by admitting your mistake, then you show that you are honest, you're sincere, and you actually mean well, and you would want things to change for the better. Okay, thanks, Greg. Dr. Jasmine.
I want to come back to the trust being a timeless value, right? And it is something that is built over time, and that in order to have any impact, any outcome, we need to build this as a shared value, not one burdened and one is just sitting there to judge, but it's a shared value. And I want to go back that the reputation capital starts with every person, every Malaysian, every organization, and as a nation. Thank you.
I think I want to emphasize the point on the roles that everybody has to play, and maybe begin by saying that I'm going to be mentioning generation, but I'm not a big fan of stereotyping, so I don't talk about generation Y, Z and all that, but generation C is something I really like, which is what we are all today are. Generation connected. Because it's not age bound. Okay? Because I've always said, just because I wasn't born in 1980, what makes you think I don't use tech? Right? So Generation C is connected. It's not bound to age, but it's about behaviors, right? And one of the behaviors is we trust peers. We have our people that we trust, and that's your point just now in terms of you wouldn't take an Airbnb until you've seen some trusted names and people who've endorsed it. So anyway, but we are connected. The point is we are connected. We cannot solve or build better if we attempt to approach it the way that we did pre-COVID, right? We already knew, we saw the signs with digitalization. We were stubborn, right? And then COVID-19 was presented to us, and I think we are in a much better place to truly understand what connected means. It's not just about me taking care of myself, right? Or I can say, go to heck, this is me, so I'm just going to go out. But then when I go out, I infect all of you, right? So we are connected in every sense of the word. So everybody needs to come, and the solution needs to be together, right? I know I'm running out of time, but I remember many years ago, we were walking together, a few of us, going from breakfast to the stage for an event. It was for school children, and as we were walking, I saw litter, the styrofoam containers, and I looked around for the waste bins, and there wasn't any. So I asked this person from an institution of the 4. I said, I don't see any waste bin baskets. Where are these children going to dispose of the packed breakfast that they were given? And he proudly said, well, we don't do plastics. I said, okay, but that's a solution that's incomplete, right? The poor children, they're going to be stuffing their used nasi lemak containers into their bags, the more responsible ones. The rest have thrown it to the side, right? So we must approach problems in a holistic manner, and all parties together. We are connected. Every problem is connected.
Wonderful. Generation C, I learned something new. Thank you so much, Dr. Nura, for that. And I want to thank our panelists, all of our panelists, for such a wonderful session today. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure chatting to all of you. And to our audience today, thank you for being such an engaged audience and for sending in all your questions. We took as many as we can. We hope we got them answered. Thank you for sending them in and for staying with us all the way till the end. I'm going to hand it back now to Sophia, but I want to say thank you for having me as your moderator today. It's been such a pleasure being part of this event. Over to you, Sophia.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, esteemed panelists, for such an insightful session and for spending your Thursday morning with us. And to all our guests, thank you for tuning in. The full report and key takeaways of the 2021 Edelman Trust Barometer results will be shared to the email address registered. Until then, thank you and take care.